I'm going to take your role as a moderator. So I'm the chairman of the UK Israel Tech Hub, and today I'm here with a delegation of 12 Israeli startups that were selected among the 300 startups in Israel, or maybe more these days, that are operating in the field of cyber. And they are here with us. We'll be visiting the top leading UK corporations, including RBS this afternoon. If you'd just like to stand up. Thank you. So we can talk about cyber for hours, but we need to be conscious of time. So it's going to be more like a sound bites than a real discussion. I'll start with you, Chris. Where were you on May 12th?
May 12th. Sticks in the mind. Surprisingly, I was actually at home.
Okay.
So it was
Friday, right?
It was Friday, so work from home day Fridays. And you get this call saying, there's something funny going on with the NHS. What do I know about it? So it's interesting that the first call I got was from the board, not my incident response team. So I gave them a bit of grief for that. And then quick bit of triage and discovered that we weren't going to be impacted, so we were in a good place. But then we kind of set up an incident 24/7 through the weekend just to make sure that there wasn't any changes to the situation that would impact us.
So how long did it take from the time you got a call from your board member? As you said, it's not a typical call you get on a Friday night, until you know that the bank is actually safe.
So it didn't take us too long. So it was very quick. Once we knew what the issue was, to confirm that we were patched and we had all the controls in place. I think the biggest challenge we had was getting reality on what the attack actually was. So one of the problems we have in the industry, in the security industry, is getting that ground truth on what a problem is. And there was so much misinformation in the first, I'd probably say 6 to 12 hours, that it really made life difficult for us. So to the point where I was comfortable we were safe was probably about 24 hours. But it wasn't because we didn't have the information, it was because we didn't know what the actual attack was.
Okay, so this is an event that I understand the bank was not affected.
Nope.
Lucky for you. Walk us, I think the audience would like to hear, walk us through what goes through an operation which is affected. I mean, you have big responsibility, CSO of a big bank. What happens when you are affected? Legal, forensic, operational stuff, PR?
Yep.
What's the gameplay?
What's the gameplay? So we have a very well-drilled incident management program that we roll out the minute we think we've got a challenge. I'm not superstitious. I can't find any wood to tap, but touch wood, it will never happen to us. But we exercise quite regularly. So when we do have an incident, we basically convene members of each part of the business. So we're a big organization. We cover multiple brands, everything from Coots on the kind of the wealth side through to NatWest, the Royal Bank. We have international presence as well. So each line of business is represented on a call straight away, where we discuss what is happening. The business gets an opportunity to say if it's going to have an impact on them. The technology organizations do the same, and then we basically remediate across the entire business, and that includes everyone from communications through to our regulatory affairs, because we need to make sure that everyone is on the same page, and getting those identified people on one call very, very quickly is key to managing it in a timely fashion. And then if it does turn out we're impacted, we'll then escalate it, and ultimately it goes all the way up to our execs.
Okay. So as I mentioned, there are about 300 to 400 startups in Israel.
Yes.
And I assume that when you will meet them, each one will explain to you that he is addressing your latest weakness. This is exactly the area that you will have to protect, because this is the next big threat. What are the real technological challenges that you are facing? And how do we address this multi-vendor situation that everyone would like to offer you his best solution against a threat that can happen or not?
It is quite a challenge for us, because I get pretty much someone knocking on the door every day saying that they've got the magic silver bullet that will solve all my woes. I think those that have the most success in talking to the bank are those that have done the homework and generally understand the problems I face, and from the perspective of a bank, not kind of an academic problem, so who can relay their solution into the real-world problems I'm facing. When I look at the big challenges I get today, identity is probably a really big one. And I get lots of people who bring me an identity solution that's probably a smart card or it's a mobile phone. And they're great, but if you understand my business, I deal with everyone from children who've got their first bank account at age 5 or 6, all the way through to the millenniums who've got a smartphone, through to my grandmother who still wants to use a checkbook. So having an identity solution that just relies on a smartphone doesn't actually solve my problem. It's for a very niche part of the problem. So I'm looking for someone who can take that bigger picture and bring a solution to me.
So Nimrod, we'll talk about the Israeli angle in a few minutes, just to complete the challenges that you are facing. So you have the technological challenge, but I assume that there are also people challenge.
Yes.
Complacency, it could be relevant with your customers who would not change their password despite all the warnings, or even with internal, despite the fact that the risk of cyber is now becoming more and more well known. How do you address the people challenge of understanding the risks of cyber?
In fact, the people challenge is probably the biggest. It's not a technology problem. So if I look at the attacks against the bank, the bulk of them are actually against our customers and not against us as an institute, because they are the weakest link. So many of the attacks we see are encouraging our customers to install stuff they shouldn't be doing, handing over control of their machine to a fraudster, transferring money as part of a scam. So we have to have a really big educational campaign that addresses that, raises awareness of what the attacks are. But on the flip side, we have to look at our technology and get it to a point where actually doing the right thing is the default behavior for our users. So as an industry, technologists are very good at coming up with very technical solutions, but they don't put it through the user testing. So whether it's the design of a web form or an application or the way we set up a transaction, we need to build into that kind of like an understanding of the human psyche such that they do the right thing by default, and that it's actually very hard and counterintuitive to do the wrong thing. And there's quite a few examples of how advertisers do that to encourage people to spend more money, and we need to take those learnings to develop kind of the good practice that our users and our customers do when they're using our technology.
Okay. Before cyber became famous, and before everyone started talking about cyber, banks had issues in the past. We're talking about fraudsters. The risk was data being stolen, and the risk was more on a balance sheet or account of a specific customer. I guess this is still the case, but with cyber, the enemy can be also a country which starts with an N, as an example, that wants to get the entire bank out of operation. How do you look at it at the bank? Who is the enemy right now?
So I think if you look at who the enemy is, you're probably looking at the wrong end of the telescope. So I like to look at what have I got that somebody else, what have I got that I care about, and then look at for whom that's an interest. So something like data is going to be of use or of interest to identity thefts and the fraudsters, but we also have a lot of intellectual property that might be of interest to a nation state. So there are some governments who've got interest. So I look at it from more about what do I have and who would want it, rather than who the enemy is. Because if you look at who the enemy is, you're probably going to miss a trick, especially when the lines get blurred between nation state and organized crime and fraudsters. Actually, you can't really separate them into those stovepipes, because in some countries they're one and the same. Okay.
When I was the permanent secretary of the Ministry of Finance, it happened that our Prime Minister visited the intelligence units, was very encouraged from what he has seen, and has made a decision to turn the technology in Israel not only to defend the country, but also as a way to extend the industry and to offer whatever innovation we have to the rest of the world. And we worked together with the Prime Minister Office, the military secretary, and so on, to establish the Israeli National Cyber Initiative, which was, again, established a few years ago, maybe ahead of time, very innovative at that point of time. What is you see is the role of government here in the UK, whether it's in guidance, in regulation, maybe even in establishing a cert for banks?
So I think the government has a very careful balancing act because on one hand they are the regulator, but on the other they have a role in supporting incidents as and when they happen. Excuse me. So I think the biggest thing that governments can do to help is almost a coordination and facilitation role. So no one industry can solve this problem. So the telecom sector has a huge part to play in this, as does a lot of the technology companies, as do the crime agencies, as do us as financial sector. So there's a role from government to encourage cooperation across sectors, but also to enable facilitation within a sector where we are naturally competitors. So there's a role that government can play in anonymizing or removing attribution so that we can share information without necessarily having to attribute it to a particular organization so that we're not at a commercial disadvantage.
Nimrod, your fund is a major investor in cybersecurity. You personally are very familiar with the topic. What is the latest innovation that you believe big UK corporations should be aware of in terms of cyber?
Sure. First of all, the main assumption now with cybersecurity that we have a huge disadvantage between the attacker and the defender. To be honest, we currently have a failing architecture, IT architecture, which is very easy to attack. All the basic foundations of the protocols that we have, the interconnectivity between the systems fail in terms of security. So we have kind of like a disadvantage where it's very easy to hack. In such a situation where it's very easy to hack, we no longer focus on prevention, assuming that we'll be able to stop the attacker. We actually shifted to early detection and prediction modes that predict that an attack is about to happen. So I'll be in the incident response mode or understanding that I have a scenario much earlier than I had before. Second issue that we realized that organizations were buying more and more systems that send them more and more alerts, but actually they have the alert fatigue. They have hundreds of thousands of alerts from their system that it's almost impossible to digest, analyze, or get any insights. So we understand it's about time to reduce the dimension of data that we have. We're using a lot of kind of like big data analytics now, anomaly detection engines, log correlations in order to take all the security systems that you bought, but get you some insights about the actual state of security of the system. Another thing, we do assume that you'll fail. We do assume that you will experience an incident. So if you fail, that you fail gracefully, that you have something like a backup plan, that you have some recovery plan for your organization which is technology-backed. Next time you are extorted by erasing your data or data theft, that you know actually whether you have the second copy of your data or how you can recover in operation. Another thing we understand, we need orchestration of security systems. We used to have security systems, each one is focusing on one designated system, kind of like checking the health of this system. We understand you need to orchestrate them all together. And that's a role that mainly the big players have, of taking all these security systems and putting them under one pen or under one analytics. And the last thing, which also the government has a role to play, is around these kind of like data sharing platforms that enable you in real time to exchange IOCs, indications of compromise, and be able to act together in actually understanding the indications early on to protect others affected partners.
Talking about government, will the Data Protection Act, the GDPR that is coming out next year, is it an issue for chief security officers?
It's certainly something I've been following. It's an interesting one. If you look at GDPR, it's kind of split into two, and everyone focuses on the security part. But actually, as a heavily regulated industry, the security part we've had to do for years anyway. I think the bit that is different in GDPR that doesn't get enough attention is the privacy side. So it's things like the right to be forgotten, the ability to request your own information in a machine-readable format. So it's that side of thing which is newer to us and where we're putting a lot of effort to make sure that Touchwood become Mayweather compliant.
I think, by the way, Haim, we see a lot of innovation coming from Israel on the GDPR front, because we used to think about security and privacy sometimes as conflicting interests. Once you want to have the data more private, sometimes it's less secure because you cannot analyze the data for security threat. Sometimes it's a problem with privacy can hide actually threat vectors and a lot of information there. So we consider them as kind of like two vectors that sometimes are in conflict. What's interesting, the innovation we see now out of Israel is for the first time you have like databases that you can have the data encrypted or hashed, so it's secured, but at the first time that it's utilized or usable for inquiries, something like databases that we call both encrypted and inquirable. We see a lot of innovation in protecting against third parties, companies that understand that third parties is a risk. You have to use them in the current telecom architecture, but these third parties actually expose your data and the privacy of your clients at risk. For the first time, we have monitoring system and actually compliance systems on these third parties provided by Israeli technologies.
So talking about Israeli companies, for those startups, hundreds of startups that are not here but will read Kalkalist today or tomorrow, what would you recommend for them if they would like to do business with the bank? What would be the best way to approach the bank and work with you?
So I think the biggest mistake that most startups make when they come to talk to us is they don't appreciate the scale that we have to work on. So there's lots of good innovations that might work on a few thousand endpoints or a first few thousand users. Try a couple of 100,000 endpoints across multiple countries in real time in a heavily regulated environment which has disaster recovery built in. So that's probably the biggest mistake most startups make when they come and talk to us.
I think one more point that we see with startups, if you want to work with large bank or large corporate, don't believe that you will be able to change any of their procedures, but tap into their procedures. Many companies believe that they'll change the screen, they'll change the procedure, they'll change the underlying system. Assume that the architecture and the procedures are there and see how you tap into it in the most seamless manner.
So the last question, we had the latest Mirai with the IoT attack. Are we heading for a September 11th in cyber?
I don't think so. I think the threat is clearly evolving, but I don't think we're going to have a big 9/11. We've had some big major events, and it's hurt a few people. I don't know. I'm not all doom and gloom. I think there's some good work going on in a lot of different places.
It's being recorded, as you can tell. Okay.
Well, that might come back to haunt me.
So you don't think that we are going to see a big September 11th
I don't. So
on the
if you,
cyber front?
I think we'll see more high impact like the NotPetya type of attack. I think we'll see a lot more of those. It'll become more common. But business went on. Nothing came to an end. No one has gone bust as a result of being impacted by NotPetya, even though they lost, in some cases, their entire IT system. I think we're prepared for that.
So on this happy note, I think we can end the panel. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much,
Thank
Haim.
you.
Thank you very much, Chris. Thanks for your kind of...